The reality is it's about more diversity within Pittsburgh. That it's about better training and understanding racial bias. It's about a whole host of things that advocates have been asking for a long time. And body cameras is really just a tool, an additional tool, to get at police accountability and transparency. What we have seen across the country in Boston is no exception, which is honest record of what happened in the city. Now, I've said in this police department, having sat with Commissioner Evans many times, and trust me, much better than Commissioner Davis, that she brought us in a position and we talk regularly. But the reality is where, as we used to coin a phrase in college, right, we had a higher student population. We're the best and worst. And the reality is there's not one. If I fill this room with black cops from the MBTA to the state police and Boston police, and we closed the door and said, let's have a conversation, they would tell you about racist cops that they work with every day. That walk our communities to this day and will arrest somebody, will engage a person in a disrespectful manner. So while we celebrate Chief Ross and we celebrate some of the initiatives underway under this police commissioner, there is absolutely no doubt that when we have an honest conversation, there is racial bias playing out on the streets right now. That if you did not know, there was a police officer who, when he was off duty, was using all kind of racial slurs. There was the N-word scroll on the Mattapan police station. There is a long history of this stuff happening, and the reality is it takes time for truth to catch up in this history. We're just starting to unravel and find out all these stories that people that you didn't know about racist cops in the streets of Boston. Actually, on our block. Come on a second.
Environment, entitlement, privilege, equality feels like oppression. And I will say this, and I'm not taking away from any of the progress. In fact, you know, I've been in law enforcement my whole career, and I've been enormously proud from the Boston Miracle forward of the kind of work that gets done in this state and in the city of this state that doesn't get done elsewhere. But you know, some of you might know I do a weekly thing on Jim and Mario, and just recently there was a conversation between Jim Rowdy and I, and it was sort of surprise that the DOJ issued the report on Baltimore, and this is on the heels of Ferguson. And he was sort of surprised, and I kind of looked at him and said, you know, all of this stuff, all of these shootings, that's history. I invariably, when I talk about police shootings, and I know it's offensive to police officers, I talk about, I go back to the history of lynching. BlackLivesMatter has to be said because they have not mattered historically. Lynching was an acceptable way to maintain control over the population. And, you know, the last vestige of being able to shoot someone, the last place where that can happen, where there is not an immediate law enforcement response, is if you're wearing a uniform. And I'm not talking about the Boston Police specifically here. But what I am saying is that people of color, not just black people, have known for decades, if not centuries, that these killings were going on. It's just now there's a technology to report it.
And I kind of want to build upon what former sheriff just said. It's really racism, right? It's a disease, and when you see what happened on the streets and people getting killed by police, that's a consequence of it. And that's the only thing that most people see in their face. And don't get a job because you're black, or try to get a loan, a mortgage, and you get the highest rate. But it's another thing for yourself to be killed. So when that's in your face in America right now, it's a consequence of so many other decisions that systematic racism is placing upon us every day. So police becomes the first point of contact. I mean, when you look at the daily basis in terms of government, in terms of who deal with the people on a daily basis, mostly the police, right? So the decisions sometimes can be, you know, based upon systematic things that can translate into the street, and then people get killed. But so police right now, in terms of the cameras, that's just one thing, right? In fact, I got a bill that I put through about nominating special prosecutors to deal with investigations, police do kill somebody. So that's just another fact. There's so many different things that we're working on a daily basis to put it together to better our lives. So this is just one component that police needs to be. And I used to be and I give much credit to the PD, but when you talk to kids on a daily basis, they are angry because they deal with these often, right? They may not be killed every day, but that's happening. People being posted. So a man like me to walk out and feel like I could be shot.
Okay, that's what it is. Tom, I'll come to you next, and Alberto, I'll come to you after. Please, Tony.
So, in terms of the police and Black Lives Matter, I have a question for everyone, which is, how many in here have had a negative experience with the police?
Looking this way, right?
So, I think that's our reality, and it really goes back to the media discussion that we had, which is, there are things happening in our community that are not being covered by the media, or not being, what I would say, responsibly covered by the media. And there's some great things happening in our community that are not being covered. And then there's some things that are happening to us in the community that are not being covered. So that does translate into dollars. I mean, you're going to hear a constant thing from me about money. But until we can, I'd say, get the media to really focus on the wonderful things that are happening in our community, the 98% of the people that are getting up every day and going to work and taking care of their families and building businesses, jobs, as opposed to every time you pick up the paper looking at the 2% that are doing something wrong. And then the police who are just aghast that we're focusing on, it could be the 2% of them that are doing something wrong, and saying, how can we be having this conversation when there's 98% of us that are doing something right? Well, when it's us, and they focus on the 2%, then it's okay. But when it's them, and we focus on the 2%, it's not okay. It's really not okay for either side. We have to get to the point where we're focusing on the 98%.
I want to go to you first, Alberto. As an owner of a media organization and being a Latino in the city and having a lot of friends from all backgrounds, how is it that your organization, your news organization, embraces this discussion around race and then talk to your readers about race? What do you guys deem as the most important, the most significant messages around race that we can get to your readers?
Well, like I said, it's one of those issues that, and again, I don't know the situation in Dallas, Texas, California, as a Bostonian, someone who lived here, who remembers when East Boston was a town, and South Boston was a place of 12-year-old I was very afraid to go to. It's, again, I come back to we're in the middle of the time. You have to straddle that very difficult balance. I hear Michael Curry, and I always agree with Mike. I can feel his passion. He's been on the show, and it's something that I admire. And I understand where he's coming from. But I also understand that not all, especially you can't relate all the time to the American experience. It's a different, in many cases, and again, I'm talking about the Boston community, which is a very diverse Latino community. You're Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, many Latinos come over here, very grateful to this country. They look up at institutions that maybe African American friends have a lot of suspicions towards. So it's sometimes a lot of different, it's a different angle. I see Felix Arroyo, Felix and I, Felix and I, some of our counterparts, he's a little bit older. But we have this discussion all the time that I can see some of the discussion going both ways. And I can understand let's call it a lack of knowledge sometimes. Sometimes it's more, it's more malicious, but other times it's lack of knowledge. When I went to BC High, I was the only Latino in that place. And it was all Irish Catholic. It wasn't Italian. It was the Irish Catholic, and then it was, Upper East Side. And I learned a lot from them. I was in Cuba, I was Puerto Rican, everybody spoke Spanish. So it's very difficult as a media outlet, as a, you know, from the Hispanic point of view. It is complicated because some of these issues also happen in other countries. You know, we heard a lot, I don't know if you're aware, but, you know, in Fatima was in the audience, there's a big problem in the Dominican Republic with their neighbor Haiti. You know, the way Dominicans treat Haitians. And a lot comes from their darker. Okay? So this again goes back to it's not just a Boston issue, it's not just an American issue. It's a human race issue that needs to be talked about.
Sure. So if he's not going to go out, the other piece of it is that, you know, where he found the market in the land he was at conversation. And we picked up and one, there's a lot of community papers that do the same thing. Smiling people of color. People want to advertise on a thing like that. You see, once you're, you know, you're selling services or you have, there are some political conversations that you have in that paper too. But still, when you open it up, there are people smiling, having a good time, showing like the 98% of everything else.
Same thing for the banner. That's
And that's okay. Yeah,
the banner, right?
I know there's a couple places like that.
Yeah.
When we have a similar issue with competition, they're trying to sell that 2% story. And I think what I'm going to in the community, that's what 8%. But I get concerned about this that, you know, and it's universal woman because it's important that I would rather spend my time with that conversation about the maturity on set aside to deal with yes, shopping for something. I think that's a great idea. I'd rather be more talking about diversifying our police force in our use of force policy, not one, two, de-escalation. That's a piece of paper. It's not a piece of paper that you go to when somebody gets shot, right? So you can say to somebody, did you try to de-escalate? Well, no, I didn't. So now we do is we implement every state, and it means something to folks. And then we train the police officers. Some police officers like force having that de-escalation training, we have police force training since 25, 30 years. You get kind of rusty. I actually Spanish all the time. If you're going to use Spanish, you just forget the word, and it's the same thing when you use force. The first reaction is to say something. Really, that's not supposed to be when you try to use force to get something like that. I feel like the better use of time is not talking about this technology, it's talking about those things that will make a difference. How do you change the percentage of people of color are police force and the fire department? That, at the end of the day, when you get into a police officer rolls up on somebody on the street, is going to say, well, I understand this person's experience, and tell me about it.
Superintendent of the National Street Jail, Mr. Eugene Suffolk. So, plea bargains where defendants plead guilty. What role does prosecutorial discretion have in dramatically knocking away the black and brown lives who have never faced?
Well, first of all, a decision to plead is always the defendant. The prosecutor can never make the defendant take a win. You can never stop the defendant actually from trying to protect them. So with regard to plea bargaining, that's not on the prosecutor's office to determine that. We don't drive that bus. We make recommendations, the defendant makes a recommendation. And in Massachusetts, what a lot of people don't realize is that, especially in Suffolk County, it's defendant cap plea, meaning that I can put up a recommendation 5 years for house of correction. If the defendant asks for probation and the judge agrees with me, the defendant can withdraw that plea. So to put on the prosecutors or the DA's office the idea of how many people are incarcerated is, in my view, wrong. Like we don't control that now. Do we ask people to be incarcerated? Sure. If you have a history of violence, if you have a history of like convictions, if you have a certain, if you need certain criteria with regards to what you've done and what your history is, then yes, I will recommend that you go to jail to protect my community. But to say that the prosecutor's office is the reason why people are in jail is, I think, picture here. Defendants plead guilty most of the time, or like I would hope most of the time, because they are in fact guilty. And I can't control it. Well, I make a recommendation of what I can happen to them. I'm not the final say on that. And in fact, I can't even, like, especially in district court, I do not control that. So,
we're all familiar with the medical assistance. Do district attorneys
turn that half and next.
So I look at really differences. Of the 113 individuals that I have on management, 87% of that body is black and brown. It would seem to me as something of races of color that have fled out to mandatory.
So let me do this one. I was a prosecutor for 16 years. And it's a man, not an or. Tanya is absolutely right that when the trial system went from, you used to be able to get a bench trial in the district court, and then you could appeal that finding from a judge and go to a jury. They did away with that. And it's a one trial, single trial system, and it became a defendant capped plea system in the district court. She's absolutely right that the rule is in district court, not superior court, but in district court. The judge exceeds what the defendant is asking on the plea, then the defendant has the right to withdraw the plea and go to trial. That the prosecutor is putting in a recommendation on a piece of paper, the judge will follow it out. I was there when mandatory minimums, it was a prosecutor mandatory minimums went into effect. And I can tell you that, like most people wanted mandatory minimums back then. People sort of forget it over 20 years ago because some of the courts were revolving doors. And what we were hearing from people in the community and others in the community were things like, I know that kid went to court today. That's the one that slings in the playground when my kids want to play. And he's back here after 3 o'clock. I know he went to court today. How come he's back here now? My kids can't go outside. So there were problems on a number of different fronts. The theory of mandatory minimums was that it was supposed to have an impact on it. There's a huge difference between the theory of the law and the practice of the law. And that's and so it does become a tool by which you can exact the plea because a person does not want to take the mandatory minimum. People have a sufficient number of convictions to make them really worried about facing the mandatory minimum. So my whole point in this is that there are so many areas of gray. And yes, do those areas of gray result in an overabundance of black and brown people being incarcerated and being that's absolutely true. But we have to at least, if we can get to the point to have a reasonable conversation, we have to acknowledge the gray, that there is an and then you work to make the part that isn't working well in practice, the way it's supposed to work in theory, you work to make that better. But you have to acknowledge the and. It's not all the prosecutor's office, but there are tools a prosecutor has that can force it. By the same token, there are people who have amassed a sufficient level of criminality that they are absolutely going to be on the hook for that mandatory minimum, and they're going to make that choice.
Well, I'll talk to you about Steve here.
Yeah, examine the issue of mandatory minimums a lot, both my company and also the law community, and found that views on them are certainly different than they have been in the past. Well, the idea was examined at that time. It did have quite a history, but recall recently, it's one of many issues where opinion is considerably now more, I don't know if it was enlightened or progressive or informed, but they're much
That is a joke with the St. Patrick's.
So we've been joined by City Councilor President, General seat, and Jesse Summer from Senator Sophie Chen. I have her clip. You speak to this group of races, presidential races going on, from your point of view, so we can not speak on behalf of your organization, but how you see this dialogue, this contest playing out between the two groups.
Well, I'm not going to read my local opinion, but I'll tell you what the voters tell me, right? So like, I can tell you what folks say to us when we go to interview them. And it always goes back to a conversation that I had in the newsroom when they sent me out to New Hampshire after Donald Trump first made his comment about the ban on Muslims. And everyone in the newsroom assumed that I was going to go out and get feedback and comments that people were going to be outraged and they were going to be disgusted and folks were going to be disavowed. And I knew, because I've been speaking to editors, that nothing could be further from the truth. And editors were insistent, no, you need to go speak to folks. And they, so we went. And sure enough, voter after voter after voter after voter said, I mean, I wish you down by some of the rhetoric, like maybe it's about time. Maybe it's about time. Maybe it's about time someone stands up and says these things. And the most interesting point of those conversations were these are folks who voted for President Obama not once but twice. These were voters who, we talk about race and racism, if you ask them on their face were they racist, they would say no. I have voted for President Obama. I voted not once, but twice for a Black president. No, I like Donald Trump because he, how did my man put it to me? He's not going, he is for, basically he was for like a freedom of religion, that's what it was. He's for freedom of religion. Somehow his ban on Muslims made him freedom of religion and made him more kind of accepting because Donald Trump was not going to be force-feeding him Christian ideology. My point in all this is the mental machinations that voters make in making these decisions all are mind-boggling. It all stems back to he's going to give us our country back. And really deconstructing what that phrase means for people. And voters will tell you that. He is going to give us our country back. He says what he means. He is not PC. We'll begin to deconstruct what do those phrases actually mean and get to the heart of it. And we've touched on a few of these points today. When you ask people, interesting, what do you mean by that? which is what I have to say because I can't really tell them what I'm thinking because I lose my job. So you quite often see me say, interesting, what do you mean by that? They can't express it. There's a disconnect because they are looking at me, a black woman, so they're not going to say on some level what you know they want to say. So they will begin to say, oh, well, he's going to give us our country back. He's going to take it back to a time when we were prosperous. Someone like me didn't have a college education, could go and do all of these things. Well, someone like you could go and do all of those things, but someone else was very much not able to. So whose country are you? Whose country is being given back to them?
Michael, I want to come to you with a question about President Obama. I want to go to Terry first, picking up on that theme about making our country, make America great again. And Donald Trump talking about it's going to bring jobs, it's going to bring prosperity, and everybody's going to go to work and live happily ever after. From the banking standpoint, from the business standpoint, do you buy this?
The short answer is no. And I'll add to that, I think that there is unfortunately not enough conversation and not enough attention paid to policies that actually could help us bring jobs to America and to help people train and transition from a manufacturing industry to the service and technology industry that exists today. There isn't enough conversation in this at this political time about the poor and about how we're going to address poverty. And there's too much conversations about the sort of attention-getting things that this man, who I won't even say his name, continues to say. And so I think we're getting lost as a community in terms of what our needs are. And that's my concern about this.
Dan, I'm going to go to you with Mike. First question for you. As we enter the final months of Obama's second term, do you believe people of color are generally better off as a result of his presidency? Why or why not? What has Obama's tenure in office meant to you as a black man in the community? So that first part of that is, are people of color better off because we have a black president?
Because I can't go without first making a comment about the Trump candidacy. And as a nonpartisan organization, I will say it this way. I've said often that, there's a Bruce Willis movie where the little kid says, I see dead people. And I think for any of us who do social justice work and civil rights work, when you do this work, you see racism. You see the data, you see the instances, you see the incidents, you're investigating, you're bringing cases, you see this stuff. I believe that a generation of us don't want to see it. And when we talk about Latinos, the numbers are equally as disturbing for Latinos as they are for Latin America. Health disparities, wealth gap, go down the list. So the reality is that we have, when you think about Trump, he's really uncovered a part of America that people thought was gone, that we were post-racial. And now he's brought all those bigoted, racist, blatantly mean-spirited people out that they now feel empowered to say. And guess what? They're doctors, they're teachers, they're lawyers, they're guidance counselors, they're your mechanic. There are people that you see every day who feed into that ideology. They're not just people you see on TV, they have jobs. So that's one. In terms of Obama, I think that the reality is we have to celebrate our first African president. I look forward to reading his book when he's done, right? The racism, the blatant opposition he faces as an African president. I look forward to reading Paul Patrick's book when he writes about being the first black governor. Some of our first black neighbors. Because there's a story to be told when he said that nothing you do will succeed. And we will stand in your way and oppose any piece of legislation that would be a part of your legacy. That is a true story. That's, again, truth catching up to history. So to me, I think, did he do everything? But no one man can do everything. Duvall couldn't do it as governor. President Obama couldn't do it as president. There are systems in place. There's a Congress. There are institutions. There are agencies. You inherit people that work in those agencies. It takes time to transition some people out with those views that are frankly obstacles. I say that as a people, we're not in a much better place than we were when we took office. Other than the fact that there are now some key people in key places that will pay dividends years from now, if we can keep that.
Okay, so Terry, hold on a second. So Terry, when the president came into office, the stock market was what, around 6,000, it's around 19,000 now. He's created, what, 14, 15, I don't know, millions of jobs. Why is that not talked about? I'll come back to you, Alberto, Danny, I'm going to definitely get there. I'll come back to you.
Before I let this go, because this is so important, because I work with them. If folks thought that healthcare reform doesn't benefit you, you're a fool. Now, the majority of those people who are walking around this country without health insurance were black and brown people. That the reality is Obamacare was a major victory for people who were walking around with cancer and diabetes and heart disease and did not know where they were to are. So it now provided an insurance card, a primary care provider. We absolutely got to celebrate that.
It's under 15%. Under 15% are now, it's only, they're uninsured, it's under 15%. When he came into office, it was somewhere in the 30s.
I just want to add, I think that we have forgotten how bad things were in 2008. We were losing 750,000 jobs a month. 750,000 jobs a month. We're now actually gaining 250,000 jobs a month. So 250, they're saying, well, it's not enough, that's not enough. But that's a million swing. I mean, every month it was 750,000 people were losing their jobs. And that absolutely impacted African Americans. And it's no question that we're not where we want to be. It's not where we need to be, but we are so far much better than we were from 2008. Things have definitely gotten better.
To use a navigation thing, I think he's going to be one of the most consequential presidents because in the storm of storms, in many storms, we did not end up on the sword. We are actually going in a direction that is positive. We didn't go where we wanted to go. We all had this great idea. Person of color, all these great ideas. We have all these problems. And not only in that Congress, but also sustained belief that government can't do things. We have to fight that they have been doing for 12, 16 years before that. That, hey, let's go to a program that works.
Listen, any of you can chime in. Hold on a second, Alberto. So, President Obama's gotten a lot done. Would you say that his communications team hasn't done an effective job in getting that message out, or has the opposition just been so effective in keeping the good stories, the good news down? Who wants to jump?
I think it goes back to this idea of the 98% story doesn't sell as well. Everybody wants to do the contract.
Yeah, there's also this belief that even predates President Obama that there's been an increasing doubt that government can do anything. I mean, that's not new necessarily with President Obama. It's worse now, not just because of him, but because it's been growing for a while. Congress's approval rating, just to take one number, has been bumping along historic lows and recently hit like a 3-year high, something like 18%. We now think Congress is doing a good job. So, these numbers are bad and have been bad. The idea that government can't do anything right, I think, it has been growing for some time, partly due to the way that parties talk about that idea, but not only because of President Obama.
Alberto, mine really doesn't have too much with politics because I have an 18-year-old daughter who was 10 years old when Obama became president. So all of her pretty much adult life, or teen years, she's had a black president. So she doesn't remember the Bush era before. And it's this generation of not just African Americans who now can believe that you can become president, but people like my daughter who, for her whole life she's had black presidents. So to her, it's it would be normal to have a woman or another black president or Latino. So, and something else too that gets lost in this is, without again politics, I think if nothing else, even if you don't agree with Obama on his politics, you cannot say he hasn't been presidential. He has been a classy gentleman.
So then, recently the mayor has embarked
having this conversation. I'm here as state representative, representing one of the most diverse districts in the city of Boston. Prior to the entire country exploding with the community police relations, prior to Ferguson and some other horrific incidents, he applied for and received the Rockefeller grant to push the envelope on the conversation on race to pull folks up here on the panel to make people uncomfortable. The first gathering we had was with our elected officials. The most recent gathering that we had was last week with a very diverse group of citizens, and his hope is to continue having the conversation, continue to make us all uncomfortable until we can make some real
Is
progress.
there gonna be some sort of reporting, some report that's gonna come out of that? And our community group's gonna be charged with keeping that dialogue going on when the mayor and his team leave.
So I don't know the answer to the first part of the question because it's, as we recognize pretty clearly, this is complicated stuff. I'm not sure a report would actually capture all the diversity perspective, even just on this 12-person panel. I know that he's engaging numerous community partners to continue the dialogue moving forward, and many of them are sitting up here today.
Michael, when the mayor first got in, I believe NAACP and the Urban League wanted to put together a report card. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think a report or report card on these meetings, these listening tours around diversity, will have any impact on the meetings?
I think that it's important for the mayor to report out what he heard and what people suggested. I think that we don't do often enough in communities of color, and there's all kinds of constituencies, right? There's women of color, there's union workers, you name it. You need to look at what an administration is doing and evaluate whether it's meeting your concerns, addressing your concerns. As a community of color, it's important for us to look at this administration and say, how are we doing around policing, community policing, diversity and law enforcement, discipline issues? Are we meeting and exceeding the thresholds in education around quality, around diversity in education? That report card is still coming. It's actually very close to being finished. And there's a need to continue to do it because ultimately you got to give people political will and political courage to do the right thing. And when you sort of expose what something is and say, hey, you've done something, but it's not enough, it's not transformation, then you encourage that elected official to say, you know what, I hear them. They are criminal justice voters, they're education quality voters, and I now got to deliver on that promise I made. I think report cards are critical. We should be report carding on our city council, on our mayor, on our private industry, what they're doing around diversity. We don't do it enough.
Well, I got a question for you, but first, Father Jack, I want to go to you with this question. Many important community meetings happen each evening, but it seems like the same people show up every time. What can be done to improve community engagement in times when the community is not in crisis? How do we get people consistently come back and be a voice?
I don't know. When I first told me Saturday was a young man killed, shot by a police officer. Supposedly shot by a police officer. We found out later it wasn't. Place was crazy. Mayor, at that point said, okay, we get them together. And people from all the agencies across Northern Virginia, the civic groups got together. And they were engaged in sustained long-term discussions. The major, organizations continue to meet every month. And I think in the 6-year term, we right about 25%. I think because of community engagement. There was a great relationship built with police, amongst different civic, and sometimes it's too many civic associations, but people would be, one every night, every month. But I think when the community is engaged, when the policy realize that, you're serious about it, I think it's going to happen.
Because one of the things that we found in getting folks back to the community organization is that when we meet, that things actually happen. So when we go and say, hey, there's a problem with the streetlight, or hey, we know what the problem is, or what we do with this lot. And when I said about that same lot for 20 years, like the room gets bigger if they know the results that the chief's in. superintendent come with something from the school building, answers. That stuff makes people want to go to those meetings, because if you just go, are we really talking about that same block again? And I gotta say that I would sort of set apart from talking about how to grade data. I get concerned about that because I learned how to grade me, but I told them that you guys have 50% of your command staff of people of color in the police department. It doesn't matter where you are below the line. If you got sergeants, lieutenants, captains, chiefs of color, you can do bodies and you can make this happen. And I would applaud you guys for having that number. I wish I would have known when I was looking for my chief. I was looking for a chief of color, but we got a good homegrown chief and a new chief. But I was looking for a female captain. It's a big deal. I wish I would have known 12 months ago. No disrespect to my chief. I would have gone after them.
Right. Why is it deemed the responsibility of the Black community to solve the issues of race relations, and not every citizen of every community should be involved in those discussions?
To repeat that again?
Why is it deemed the responsibility of the Black community to solve issues of race relations and not have every other citizen included in that conversation about race relations? Why is it that Black people and people of color have to come up with a solution?
Because one, they're the ones that are hurt most by those policies that, that are turning their lives upside down. If the kids can't go to work, can't go to school, quality school, they can't get a quality job, they don't have money in the bank, they can't own a home, they're the ones that care. So the impact is on the Black community. And I'll talk briefly about, for instance, when I used to read about Malcolm X, we used to talk about controlling your community, right? This is what we're talking about. So the money from the politicians to the businesses and to the social gatherings. So we're the ones that are most impacted. We have to be the ones that lead the initiatives and the solutions, because we should know most what the solutions are for our community, right? So that's number one, the reason why it should be that way. But the second point is, it can't just be us, right? Because honestly, and if you look at the legislative body of legislation right now, you look at the Black Electoral Caucus, I believe there's 13 of us, and amongst 200, right? So when we talk about policies that affect our communities, we want our colleagues to hear them as well. So it's imperative that not only us, but our constituents talk to them, right? Oftentimes, I get people from New Bedford call me because I'm the K-Brady guy, right? But they won't talk to their reps over there, right? So, and Russell can speak to this as well. We always get the Black community folks from all across the state talking to us about the issues, but they never reach out to their actual reps. I think they should do more of that as well, because the stories, when people hear the stories that impact their lives, because once we about to vote on a big policy, those emails, those calls we get, it looks like that. And oftentimes our community people just want, right? Because either they don't know or they just don't know how to reach out.
Question for you, Chief. I have read the mediation program with Boston Police. Hasn't gotten off the ground. What would help it be successful, or was there another approach? Now, first, explain to the folks what the mediation program is.
So the mediation program, of course, we have an internal affairs complaint process, but sometimes we believe that you bring the complainant and the officer together and have a third party come in, like the folks that we have from Harvard, we have those two parties have a conversation to mediate their differences and come to a common ground instead of going through a long, drawn-out internal affairs complaint process. So we attempted a mediation.
And who was resistant to be a part of it?
So far, a lot of officers don't really, like I was telling you before about police culture, it's tough to grasp change. So we need that first officer to step forward. President Curry here, we kind of had our mediation when there was a Caucasian sergeant, right, that put a plastic gun into the face of a Black senior. And President Curry, a couple of others were the first to come forward. And what we did is brought those two persons, people together. They had a conversation. They talked about it. The officer apologized to the complainant, And there was no long drawn out internal affairs process, but two men learned about each other. They educated each other about what was going on with them that day. So
I've got a second question for you here that speaks to the hiring practices of PPD. And I don't know if the statistics are correct, you would know, Chief, you would know. It says 2014, 78.9% of the force is non-Hispanic white, 11.4% is black, 6.1% is Latino. Massachusetts hires veterans first. Why aren't we addressing the real reason why we don't have black and brown workers?
the percentages, Boston Police Department is comprised of approximately 64% Caucasian, 23 to 24% African American, then 11%. Then there's other ethnicities. But that number fluctuates because of folks retiring, getting fired, or resigning. But the cold hard answer to that is there are state laws that give veterans preference. I will never say anything bad about veterans. The state law is the state law. If I have 100 spots available to the Boston Police Department, it goes like this: disabled vets, and then veterans. That's who did the first selection. But also, I talked to Latino vets, Cabo Verde vets, African American vets. They said, why should I come from a war zone and come back to an environment where people, police are accepted? So, as a Black community, Latino and Cabo Verde, I thought we never had a conversation about maybe folks don't want to join, because when you talk about diversity, how come you're not hiring more Black people, Latinos, and Cabo Verde? Are you making it a welcoming environment for those individuals to even want to become police officers? And those are cold hard conversations that I have with them. That man, I already have a strike against me. I want to become a police officer. I'm a veteran. I'll get first preference, but it doesn't seem like the community wants me. But then it's on me as the chief. How come you're not hiring them? Is the community welcoming those candidates?
Do you have experience in the same technology?
Yes, and yes, in the extreme way, we're also having this problem where we got a capital ruling that allowed us to, back in the 70s, to, when it was 25% Hispanics, allowed to get 25% of the hires, so we could pick one person of color for 40 hire. And they haven't changed it. So I have this problem. I have to figure out ways to get, without breaking the law, taking people's rights away from the crucial service, to get more diversity. And a big part of it is we ask for just a list of civil service list with the references, which references of Spanish, of bilingual officers, candidates. That helps us get diversity. We're working with the Attorney General to get that away with, because we feel like we do that. Because of the residency requirements, we're going to get different lives and different kids who are diverse, just like Israel. But, becoming a police officer is very hard. I would challenge anyone to go home and look at the application. It's actually a state application. And it's not even called a police officer application. It's something like a civil officer, Commonwealth civil officer application. And it's incredibly difficult. So we have to end up doing application drive. We set up 20 computers, and we said, come down, we'll help you fill out the application. Because we were saying, well, why is it that only kids and police officers want to be police officers? Because mom and dad made it easy to get through, because we know this experience. It hurts the diversity. So we ended up bumping our diversity numbers, specifically around females of color, because we did this big push. And we sent 8 candidates to bilingual candidates to the police training. And half of them.
Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left. I want to go to Tanya and then Keela real quick with brief answers, and then I want each one of you to just have a closing statement. Okay, on the next. Tanya, the special courts, gun court and veterans court and these sort of things. The special courts, are they working? Do they help the system, help move people through the system, and actually keep people out of houses of correction? What's your sense of the special courts?
Well, so there are a few different specialty courts. Gun court isn't necessarily a specialty court. It was created for a different purpose. The specialty court is more veterans court, mental health court. And those courts, I think, do work. The especially with mental health, where the idea is more of a treatment and pairing people with services than the resolution of their case. And obviously, the criminal cases with drugs is what makes people eligible, but the idea is to actually pair them with services to better their lives. And what goes unsaid many times is with regards to the criminal justice system, and especially people of color, there's a huge mental health component that just goes untreated. And that drives why people commit crimes, why they continue to commit crimes. And so the mental health court, I think, does address that for a lot of people, and is very helpful, and is slowly becoming successful as it grows and affects more defendants.
Okay, like the recent piece of after every week,